Can you guys see this up there fairly well? First thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to use, you are not going to draw this dark. Again, if you're making a mark on a paper and you can see it, especially for this part, that's dark enough. First thing I'm going to do is kind of mark off just an image area. You don't need a ruler, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? You just want to define the area you're going to place these things. The next thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to draw, I got to scoot over. I'm going to draw the one, but I'm going to draw the one on this side. So I'll be looking at the side, like almost a profile of one egg, and the other one's pointing directly at. But the first thing I'm going to do is do the area that egg takes up. And I'm doing it as a rectangle. So this is the space that egg falls within, right? One of the things you'll notice is that the egg at its thickest point is not that much smaller than its length. When people jump in and just do the egg shape, a lot of times it'll end up looking like this, right? It gets too squashed and more like a football. They actually have more mass than that. And then you can use your stick. I'm going to use a pencil, but I'm a little bit far away. To see where the space of that other one would come, I'm like resting the pencil right on top of the egg, and I can see that it cuts across here. So the top of that other egg is this high up into this one. The bottom of it, if I bring the pencil up just touching the bottom, it's below it this far. And this egg is going to be a square to start with, because it's basically going to end up, it's almost a circle when I'm looking at it because it's facing directly at me. The reason I've approached it like this is, especially with this one in the background, that is not setting level, so the two kind of narrow parts of the egg are angled. So what I do is, in this square, the tip of the egg on this side will be up here, that tip on this side will be down here, and then I kind of hit the edges. And pull the egg in so it tips, right? So I've got that. So that my core shadow is kind of running like this on it, from there to there. It's kind of angling down. This one, again, would be more of a circle. And then I'm going to get rid of all, at this point, I'm not only going to lighten it, because it got so dark, but I'm going to get rid of all these extra marks. And mine are not going to go away altogether because I've drawn all that with like a 4B and made it really, really dark. But I'm still going to try to lighten it up so I can just see it. Okay, so those are the two eggs, where they're at in relationship to each other, right? The next thing I'm going to map out is the cast shadow. And I'm going to take the same approach in that I'm not just going to go and like throw an ellipse underneath it, because it usually gets to, like if this is my egg shape, usually when people do the cast shadow on it, it'll become really too round. Like shows too much of that surface. Because making a narrow ellipse, I mean in that first class when we're making one that's very narrow is hard to do. So in this case, the light's kind of coming down like this on that egg. So the cast shadow starts here, it's kind of angling in, extends out, but it only comes below the egg about this far. Like it's a skinny little ellipse. So if I hit those marks, that gives me my cast shadow. And the egg's actually going to sit down inside of that. Same with this one. Kind of angles a little bit. It only comes down this far, and the egg sits within it. All right, can you see those? They show up. So, this is a mapped out, like you don't have to do the paper they're sitting on, but if you're gonna do the paper, wait till you get the eggs in place. One of the reasons we haven't dealt with the perspective on square things is because it's a little more difficult to deal with. It has a tendency to get really too square. So the best way, like in this case, I kind of find the corners. Like the corner of this paper is here. This one would be kind of even with the bottom of the egg out here. Cuts through. So I'm kind of using the eggs as a guide. And looking at where the paper comes in relationship to them, rather than just try to draw a square piece of paper. But that's, I mean, for this, don't worry about that. Then start I'm going to stay with the 4B, but just with a light touch. You start with your core shadow and just kind of letting your arms slide. Start building up your tone. And do it kind of in layers. And do these about life size, so about the size the egg actually is. Right? So start pulling this around. Now I would take that all the way to here. Again, my reflected light is going to have a little bit of tone, and then the core shadow is going to get darker on top of that. What I'm going to do with the edge, do not have a dark outline go around these. Like I'm going to have to use line at the top because it's like white on white. But what I'm going to do with the rest of it is with my hard eraser, I'm going to get rid of that line that I put in. Yours will not be that dark. And the way I get that sharp edge is having the tone just come up and end. So in essence, I do have a line there, but the line is the same dark as my shadow. It's not darker. I'm not making a darker outline on it. On the bottom, the same thing would happen, but it's going to become a sharp edge because of the dark of this recessed shadow below it, right? So just bring that recessed shadow up. But you want to avoid this dark, even outline around the whole thing. Yeah, it makes it show up better, but it also flattens it right out because that's saying that line is the same distance from you all the way around. So even at the top where I need to use an edge, I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to let it fade out. So it's not going to be the same line all the way around. Where the light's hitting it, I'm going to let that line kind of get thinner. It could even disappear at that one point, and you're still going to connect it into an egg shape. And it'll have a lot more sense of depth or three-dimensional quality than it would if I just do an even dark line. Okay, does anybody have any questions up to this point? On the egg that's pointing towards me, right? Most people, when they draw, and this is my little eraser pen, like, but most people, when they draw that shape, will draw it kind of like this. They won't make it as pointy as the other egg, but they'll put just a little bit of a point on it coming down, right? So it's not a perfect circle. They'll kind of make it an egg shape like this, where it kind of comes down a little bit. That's not what happens. What makes it look like an egg, what gives it the point, is that core shadow. because it's not going to be an even circle. In this case, it's a little bit off to one side. It's like here. But that core shadow actually comes around, swings down to this point, and then hooks back up. So the core shadow itself kind of gives you that point, kind of gives you the way it's coming to a point, not the outside edge of the egg. Like block both of them in, and again, the cast shadow, don't let the line for the cast shadow get too heavy, because that's going to have a softer edge than the egg itself. The egg itself will have a nice crisp edge. The cast shadow will have a softer edge. Is that you'll notice on your core shadow on a lot of these that it's dark, and you can still see it pretty distinctly, but it'll have tendency to fade out at the other end of the egg. Does anybody want to venture a guess as to why? It definitely has to do with the light. What's right next to it on that side that fades out? The other egg, right? So you're getting light bouncing off of the other egg coming up on that side. Or in the case of the one I drew where it's tipped, I'm not only getting light bouncing off this other egg, but I'm also getting kind of light bouncing up from the surface of the paper a little bit more because it is tipping down towards it. So that core shadow is going to be your darkest shadow on the egg. Build it up slowly, but it's not going to be an even tone. It's not going to be the same from one side to the next.